Histobiograph.
She gave them pleasure and stole eternity. Deep beneath the crumbling bones of ancient Babylon, archaeologists uncovered clay tablets wrapped in silence, etched with symbols older than kings, older than myth. They tell of a queen so divine her kiss could bless or banish. A night so horrific, it was buried beneath 3,000 years of sand and fear. This isn't the version sung by court poets or carved in temple stone. This is the tale they tried to erase, the truth behind the most disturbing legend ever whispered in the dark corners of the ancient world. Her name was Semiramis. To her people, she was the goddess queen, flawless, radiant, untouchable. She ruled not only through laws and armies, but through an almost supernatural allure that bent even her enemies to her will. But on one blood-drenched night, that allure became something else, something monstrous. It began, as all tragedies do, with stillness. As the sun rose slowly over the ziggurats of Babylon, a strange silence settled over the palace. Not the quiet of peace, but the hush of something sacred or profane. At the heart of the queen's private chambers, the silk curtains still swayed gently from the night's movements. The floor was littered with wine-stained robes, broken ornaments, and the lifeless bodies of 100 men. They had entered her chamber young, strong, and chosen. By dawn, they were nothing more than offerings to a hunger that defied nature. Her skin glowed faintly, like the embers of a dying fire. Her hands, steady, blood-streaked, rested on her lap as if in silent prayer. Outside, the city stirred, unaware that its queen had just crossed a threshold no mortal was meant to approach. For centuries, scholars dismissed the legend. They called it metaphor, an exaggerated parable of lust and power. But buried texts, forbidden by priesthoods and burned by kings, tell another story. They speak not of madness, but of method, not of desire, but of a ritual, and not of seduction, but of spiritual consumption. Semiramis didn't fall. She ascended by stepping on the lives of 100 men. Who were they? Not prisoners, not criminals. They were hand-selected from across the empire, warriors with flawless physiques, poets with honeyed tongues, priests with virgin souls. Each was tested, medically, astrologically, spiritually. Each bore signs thought to resonate with the divine. For a year, they were housed, purified, and groomed, fed herbs to cleanse the blood, bathed in sacred waters infused with crushed moonstone, taught chants in dead languages they could not understand. They were told they were chosen for a great honor. They were not told that it would end in their death. As night fell, the chamber was transformed. Part bedroom, part shrine, part slaughterhouse. Walls inscribed with symbols known only to the cults of forgotten gods. Candles, made of human fat, flickered in sync with her heartbeat. Mirrors distorted reality. And in the center, a bed shaped like an altar, draped in violet silks soaked in something darker. Each man was brought in alone, by order of the stars. Each drank from a chalice carved from meteorite, wine laced with rare poisons that silenced without disfiguring. What followed was not lovemaking. It was ritualistic dominance, a supernatural rite she believed would fuse their essence into hers. Their strength, their wisdom, their beauty, their soul. She consumed them, not with teeth, not with fire, but with intent. And as each body fell, the air thickened. Witnesses, few who survived long enough to speak, described a soundless scream echoing from the walls, as though the palace itself was mourning. By dawn, she no longer looked entirely human. Her skin shimmered like burnished bronze. Her voice resonated not just in the air, but in the bones of those who heard it. Even her shadow seemed to move with a will of its own. And around her, the bodies lay like discarded garments, mouths open in terror, eyes glazed, fingers curled in silent protest. The royal court was told it was a fever outbreak, a lie repeated until it ossified into history. But among the servants, the legend survived. They say the queen didn't eat for weeks after that night, and yet she grew more beautiful, her eyes darker, her power absolute. And still, one question burned through the silence like fire through papyrus. Was she a monster or a mirror? A reflection of every empire that ever consumed the people it promised to protect? Because this story, her story, is not just about blood. It is about the cost of godhood, about a queen who refused to die immortal. If you felt a chill already, don't look away. This is only the first night, and the ritual has just begun. If these stories matter to you, consider subscribing to Histobiograph 365. We uncover the truths they tried to burn, bury, and forget. No queen is born in darkness, but some inherit it. Before Semiramis became the woman whispered about in terror, she was a child of dust and war. Orphaned in a time of collapse, she was found half dead among the ruins of a burned village, wrapped in linen soaked in blood not her own. The man who took her in was not a noble, nor a priest, but a desert mystic named Nasher, an exile whose eyes were said to change color with the moon. He raised her in the shadow of ruins older than Babylon itself. He taught her the stars, the ancient tongues, the old songs that priests no longer dared to sing. And most dangerously, he taught her that blood is memory, that to consume the sacred is to inherit its truth. This was her earliest secret. She didn't learn power from kings. She learned it from the forgotten. As she rose through Babylon's courts, first as a concubine, then as a wife, then as queen, she buried that past beneath pearls and politics. To the public, she was majestic, benevolent, and just. She passed laws to protect the weak, built aqueducts that brought water to parched cities, and presided over feasts that fed thousands. But in the dead hours of the night, behind curtains no advisor ever saw past, she searched for scrolls older than scripture, for voices that echoed beneath time, for something missing in the faith of men. And she found it. In the catacombs beneath the royal library, she unearthed a sealed chamber, not guarded by locks, but by curses. Its walls were marked not with cuneiform, but spirals, inverted suns, and jagged glyphs written in a red that never faded. Inside were three things: a stone mirror that reflected nothing, a severed hand with rings of unknown origin, and a scroll, wrapped in black silk and sealed with a sigil resembling two serpents devouring each other. It was called the Tongue of Ashur, twisted in reversal. A ritual text written not in words, but in symbols activated by voice, timing, and blood. It described a path to divinity, not through worship, but through fusion. It promised not immortality of the body, but of identity. To become more than a queen, it whispered, you must swallow kings. This was the moment her soul shifted. The moment ambition turned theological. She was no longer content to rule men. She wanted to outlive gods. Her body was prepared. She abstained from all earthly pleasures for 49 days. She fasted beneath eclipses. She bled herself with crystal blades and burned herbs said to blind demons. She ordered her chambers rebuilt to match constellations only visible during the nights of the open sky, a 3-day window that occurred once every 1,111 years. And when the stars aligned, she began. Each of the 100 men had been marked, not just by beauty, but by something ancient in their lineage. Some were descended from priest-kings, others from bloodlines thought extinct. Each carried a thread. Semiramis believed if she gathered enough threads, she could weave a new kind of soul. Her advisors saw nothing. Her people saw only celebration. Only the servants, those who scrubbed the stains that wouldn't fade, who heard laughter echo long after rooms were empty, felt something was wrong. They whispered of eyes watching from mirrors, of cold drafts in sealed corridors, of statues bleeding from the eyes. And above it all, the queen grew calmer. Still, as if holding her breath before plunging beneath. Then came the final preparation. She summoned 3 blind singers from a ruined temple in Elam. They had no tongues, only long flutes carved from bone. Their music had no melody, only rhythm, only pull. The chamber was consecrated not with oil, but with ash made from burnt scriptures. Candles were lit with fire stolen from a priest's funeral pyre. The altar bed was layered in obsidian, wrapped in violet linen soaked in a mixture of honey, wine, and old blood. And she stood there, barefoot, robed in white laced with thread spun from spider silk, waiting not as a queen, but as an instrument. What followed was not of this world. The ritual wasn't hers alone. Unknown to all, the text she read was a decoy. The true ritual had been designed not to grant power, but to trap it. A revenge seeded centuries ago by the cult of the Black Sun, whose temple she had destroyed in her early campaigns. Each man she consumed made her stronger, yes, but also made her a vessel. And when the 100th soul entered her, something else did too. Something waiting, something watching, something not Semiramis. By dawn, Babylon felt different. Birdsong ceased. The rivers ran slower. Children wept without reason. The queen emerged radiant. But her gaze no longer belonged to anything human. Those closest to her spoke of visions when they looked into her eyes, of deserts burning, oceans boiling, and a throne made of bone. And still, she smiled. Because in her mind, she had done it. She had become God. But beneath her skin, something else had begun to stir. They say power never comes without a price. But what if the price is not pain, but doubt? In the days following the ritual, Semiramis no longer slept. She no longer blinked. She no longer walked. She glided. The guards outside her chamber swore the air grew colder when she passed, as if her shadow arrived a second before her body. And her eyes, they were no longer mirrors of the soul. They were prisons. The court called it divine transformation. The priests, at least those who hadn't fled, declared it a sign of the god's favor. But in the deepest corners of the palace, servants whispered another word: unholy. The first to die was a stable boy. He had seen too much. He cleaned the royal corridors after dawn and found a trail of dried blood that didn't belong to any animal or any man. He followed it to a room that shouldn't exist, a door carved with concentric circles that hadn't been there the day before. By the time they found his body, his eyes had turned black. His mouth was sewn shut with golden thread, and around his neck, the same sigil that marked the forbidden scroll. It was no accident. It was a message. The queen had not sealed the ritual. She had opened a gate, and now something was leaking through. At first, it was dreams. Advisors reported nightmares of drowning in sand, of cities turned to bone, of women with no faces whispering in tongues never spoken. Then came the signs. Crops turned to ash in the fields. Livestock gave birth to stillborn creatures with human teeth. The palace fountain ran red for 3 days straight, yet no blood was ever found. The priests grew silent. The high temple of Ishtar closed its gates for the first time in 400 years. And those who once praised the queen began to avoid her gaze. But Semiramis did not flinch. She believed it was part of the process. To ascend, she must first dissolve what was mortal. Pain, illusion, death, necessary. She read the signs not as warnings, but confirmations. She even returned to the chamber where the ritual took place, alone, each night. To sit, to wait, to listen. Some said they heard her speak in languages the wind couldn't carry. Others claimed she wasn't speaking to anyone. She was answering. Then came the second death. Not a servant, but her own vizier, Abinmor, the man who had helped her navigate politics for a decade. He entered her chamber to speak of famine protests outside the northern gates. He never made it back out. His body was found twisted backward, limbs bent in impossible directions, eyes wide open in terror. There were no wounds, no blood, just a smile frozen on his face, as if he had seen something that promised him bliss before consuming him whole. Whispers of rebellion stirred. Babylon's people had survived wars, droughts, and the wrath of foreign gods. But this was something else. This was their queen becoming other. Still, she ruled. Her voice grew deeper, more melodic, almost choral. When she spoke, men wept. When she touched the sick, they either died or were never sick again. There was no middle. Her eyes saw beyond. But her heart? No one knew if it still beat. Inside, the queen began to change. Not just in flesh, but in memory. She began forgetting her past, calling advisors by the wrong names, forgetting her childhood, even confusing the names of gods. She wrote strange symbols in the margins of her royal decrees. Symbols that pulsed when ink dried. Symbols that moved. It wasn't just that she had opened a door. It was that something on the other side was looking back. And every soul she had consumed in the ritual was still inside her. Whispering, arguing, begging. Then came the mirror. One night, a servant dropped a bronze mirror in her chamber. It didn't crack, but the queen saw something that made her stop breathing for 8 full minutes. She stood frozen, staring into the metal. Not screaming, not shaking, just silent. When she finally moved, she ordered all mirrors in the palace destroyed. Every single one. Even the ones carved into temple doors. Even the ones etched into the armor of ceremonial guards. And she spoke just one sentence. They're watching now. From inside. In that moment, the legend of Semiramis split in two. To her followers, she was divine. To her skeptics, she was damned. But to those who served in silence, the truth was far worse. She was both, and neither. A vessel now, carrying too many souls in one fragile body. and the cost of godhood was beginning to break her from the inside out. The queen had become legend, but legends, when built on blood, leave stains that no empire can erase. In the weeks after her transformation, Babylon began to decay from the inside. Not visibly. No walls collapsed. No plagues swept through the streets. But the air grew heavy. The shadows lingered longer. And the people stopped dreaming. Literally. They woke blank-eyed, hollowed, dreamless for days. Until one by one, they began to see the same thing, a room of stone. A woman cloaked in white, dripping red, and 100 figures reaching out from behind her. At first, the priests blamed drought. The astronomers blamed solar misalignment. But there was no denying it. The queen's presence had begun to unweave reality. Plants died in symmetrical spirals. Rivers split without reason. Birds flew in circles until they fell dead. Yet Semiramis stood calm. She spent her days in ritual silence. Her nights in the chamber of the 100. Some say they saw her speak to the corpses as if they were old friends. Others swore she never left the room at all, that her presence in the court was an illusion. But one man knew the truth. Because he had been there. He had survived. His name was Theron. He was the 99th. Chosen like the rest, trained, purified, prepared. But unlike the others, Theron had seen death before. Not in battle, but in ritual. His mother had served in the Temple of Ash, an outlawed sect that worshipped the balance between hunger and sacrifice. From her, he had learned one lesson. To survive the goddess, you must taste the poison before it touches your lips. So when he was given the chalice, he pretended to drink. He held the wine beneath his tongue, then spat it silently into his sleeve. He let his breath slow. He let his limbs fall limp. And as the queen laid him on the altar, as she leaned in to begin the ritual, Theron opened his eyes for just a moment. What he saw would never leave him. It wasn't a woman. It wasn't a god. It was a shape, made of smoke and bone and memory. Its face changed. Each time he blinked, it wore a different mask. A lion, a serpent, a weeping child, a man with no eyes. And at the center of its chest a hole, endless, pulling in light, pulling in souls. He passed out, but not before hearing her voice, not spoken aloud, but inside his skull. Stay. Join them. Be remembered. He woke in a sewer, naked, bleeding, alive. And from that moment, he ran. Not just from the palace, not just from the queen, but from the memory. Because once you've seen what lives behind divinity, you can never believe in gods again. Theron's story spread like fire and drought. First whispered, then sung, then shouted. He became a prophet of the unholy. He wandered from city to city, tattooing the faces of the dead onto his skin, telling his tale in screams and riddles. Some called him mad. Some called him chosen. But all who listened felt something in their bones. He wasn't lying. In Babylon, rebellion festered. Not with swords or fire, but with silence. The temples locked their gates. The statues of the queen were vandalized, her eyes scratched out, her name chiseled into dust. Even her most loyal guards began to vanish, one by one, driven mad by dreams of a chamber that never stopped echoing. The people didn't need a war. They needed a reckoning. So they summoned the oldest rite in the Babylonian code, judgment by the gods. Public trial. At the ziggurat of the sky, Semiramis accepted. She walked barefoot through the streets of the capital, dressed in a robe of black veils, each embroidered with the name of one of the dead. Crowds watched in silence. No cheers, no curses, just the hush of people who no longer knew what they were looking at. At the top of the ziggurat, the high priest gathered. One read the charges. Another prepared the fire. A third, an old woman with milky eyes, spoke the sentence. If you are divine, survive the flame. If you are not, the gods will consume you. Semiramis said nothing. She smiled and walked into the fire. For a moment, the city held its breath. The flames roared. The sky cracked. Came a sound like 100 voices crying out in perfect harmony, then silenced all at once. And from the fire, when the flames died, she was gone. No body, no ash, only the scorched imprint of her feet burned into stone. And one final whisper heard by all who stood close. I was not meant to die. I was meant to remain. They say the dead leave behind ashes, but some leave behind confessions. In the hours after the queen vanished into fire, Babylon held its silence like breath held too long. No one celebrated. No bells rang. The palace stood still, its torches unlit, its halls echoing only with absence. But somewhere in the labyrinth beneath the eastern wing, a chamber door, long sealed by blood and salt, creaked open. Inside, no gold, no jewels, just a single object resting on a black pedestal. A box, unmarked, but humming. The priest called it Nadaru, that which should never be touched. It was said to hold whatever a soul could not carry into death. The remnants, the rot, the truth. That night, 3 scribes opened it. What they found wasn't parchment. It was skin, a page made from something once human, inked in a language so ancient it bled into their minds. And on that skin, a confession, from Semiramis, written in her own hand. It began simply, "This is not for the priests. This is not for the gods. This is for the one who survives me." She spoke of visions, of hearing voices before she read the forbidden scroll, of dreams she did not believe at first, visions of herself drowning in black water, chased by creatures made of memory and teeth. She had not sought power, she claimed, only understanding, only an answer to a question that had burned since she was a girl. If the gods made us in their image, why do they keep us beneath their feet? Her journey into the ritual had not been one of cruelty, but desperation. The oracles told her she would die young, that Babylon would fracture without her, that no man would protect her legacy. So she decided to rewrite fate, not through battle, not through treaties, but through blood. She admitted the ritual was never complete. The texts had warned of imbalance, that the absorption of too many souls in too short a time would tear a hole in reality. But she didn't believe them, not until she began hearing voices in mirrors, not until she saw her own reflection blink out of sync, not until she woke in her bed with mud on her feet and no memory of where she had gone. She had stopped being a woman. She had become a doorway, and something had begun walking through her. The confession darkened. She described blackouts that lasted days, memories of screams she couldn't place, waking to find her fingernails caked in ash, her pillows wet with blood not her own, and worse, a hunger that never left, a thirst not for wine, but for fear. She said she began craving the scent of terror, the taste of final breath, and she hated it, but she could not stop. The final lines were almost unreadable, written in jagged symbols, scrawled with fingers instead of quill. They are still inside me. They are not at peace, and neither am I. She ended not with a plea, but a warning. Do not seek me. Do not praise me. For every time you remember me, I remember you. The scribes sealed the box. 2 went mad within a week. The 3rd vanished. But word spread. The queen had not been a tyrant. She had not been a goddess. She had not been a victim. She had been a gate, opened by grief, held open by pride. And when she burned, she did not close. In time, a shrine was built, not in her honor, but as a warning. It bore no statue, no name, just a single inscription carved in stone. Power that demands worship is not divine. If you felt a chill just now, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, share, and let history speak again.